the summary of it is originally this was designed as a fast supersonic bomber, Mach 2 plus, I forget how fast, but at least Mach 2.
I think it was, yeah.
I think so, yeah. And kind of a multi-mission. It had that mission, but also could do low altitude supersonic penetration as well.
Which, interestingly, is a similar role to our other favorite aircraft here on the Downcast, which is the B-58. So the US Air Force get rid of one, and then they do this.
Yeah, exactly. Initially, this was not really designed for stealth. I mean, it was sort of, and some of the blending and some of the shaping was certainly lower observable than like a B-52, but its stealth aspects, I mean, it was in the infancy of stealth, so there wasn't as much done. The reincarnation of this, so of course that B-1A got canceled in the late 70s, I think. Reagan, when he got...
Carter administration.
Yeah, Carter administration. When Reagan got elected, I think it was one of his campaign promises to California of vote for me and I'll bring this back. And of course it was going to be built in California and bring a lot of jobs and so forth.
Yeah.
So that happened. I'm sure there's more to that story than that as well, but that's the summary I've heard.
And dear ladies and gentlemen, we are biased here because we are both wearing this logo, of course, of North American Aviation, which became Rockwell. So we're quite happy to be doing this.
Exactly. So the new mission of the aircraft, first of all, I think the reason it got canceled was the Air Force knew the stealth bomber was coming. Of course, that wasn't public knowledge at the time, so nobody understood why this aircraft was canceled, but that was a big part of it, allegedly. So the new mission of this was slow it down. It's still supersonic, but it didn't need to go Mach 2 anymore. Focus it more on the low-level mission and make it more stealthy. And so the primary change that I'm aware of to make it more stealthy are the engine inlets. So the original inlets to go Mach 2 has to have a variable ramped inlet, much like on the F-14 or Concorde for that matter, or the XB-70 Valkyrie, where you've got to turn that air, you've got to have variable geometry to better balance it at high supersonic speed versus lower speeds, subsonic speeds, and so forth. So the original inlets, which are kind of on this aircraft, look much like that. If you look at a Valkyrie inlet, it actually looks very much like this. Valkyrie has 6 engines, of course, fed by essentially 2 inlets back to back. This has 2 inlets back to back on each side that each feed a single engine. So once you get to the back, it's not the same. But the vertical 2D variable geometry inlet is very much like the Valkyrie, or like I said, like the F-14 just turned 90 degrees, or like Concorde turned 90 degrees. The B-1B, because it no longer needs to go Mach 2.2, they could simplify the inlet. So all those moving parts, the ramps and so forth, went away. They also did another trick on the B-1B, which radar going into an inlet and reflecting off the front fan or the face of the engine is apparently one of the most reflective, radar-speaking, parts of an entire airplane. So the B-1B, apparently if you stand at the front of it, you cannot see the engine, even though you should be able to. And it's because they've got this serpentine path of basically vanes that weave the air back and forth through the inlet to get to the face of the engine. But because that radar can't like directly go shine off of that face and get back out. So that's probably one of the bigger changes of the airplane.
Of course, the other one is the cockpit.
The cockpit, yes.
Which they've nicely marked out for us here.
Yep. So the original B-1A, to eject from this, had a whole capsule that came out. And it's funny, so the F-111 right behind it here is a similar design. So there's no specific ejection seats in this aircraft. If you want to eject from the F-111, that whole cockpit section, you can kind of see the lines of it right here and coming back, and it goes up, and that black leading edge is actually part of that as well. So that whole thing ejects if you eject in 111. And then there's a parachute that comes out of the back. That black strake there is actually important. We'll come back to the B-1 on that in a second, because when they eject at supersonic speed, that actually stabilizes that capsule and keeps it pointing forward. Another one that I read on this at one point, apparently this is the only aircraft in the world that you can eject from underwater. So the Rockies in this, I don't know how deep this works, but apparently if you land this thing in the water and you didn't yet eject and you're underwater, you can eject and it'll get out of the water and high enough for the parachutes to open and survive it. So a little fun fact on that. So on the B-1, similar, is much larger because you have more crew, but that yellow tape line, that is a whole capsule that comes out. And then if you look toward the back, you can see something that looks kind of like a flying surface, and it is. So that's contoured to the aircraft. When this thing ejects, those fold out, and they do the same thing as those strakes on the F-111. So those are basically little stabilization fins that keep the cockpit pointing forward as you eject that. And for whatever reason, I think they had some issues on this. I know there was one B-1A that crashed due to a fuel transfer problem. I don't think any of that crew escaped, and I think I don't remember the details of this, but I think the escape capsule is partially at fault there. I don't know if that's what led it to go away on the B-1B, but the B-1B has essentially standard ejection seats that eject up, and each position has their own.
Yeah, because supersonic ejection's always been an issue, because if we actually come just around here, we
Yes.
have the quite terrifying B-58 ejection capsule.
Yep.
Which, when it sort of, this element is the clamshell snaps down, and of course, as Sonny Holt told us in our previous episode, it was a shirt sleeve aircraft because this pressurizes, keeps you safe, and you don't need all the fancy stuff that you would do in a normal fighter bomber type aircraft, of course. Look at it. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I wish we had one of these here.
Oh. Yes, we'll, there's more on that. As we always do on this show, we take every opportunity to talk about the B-58. Be sure to check out the full-length Mach 2 secrets of the B-1A Lancer, filmed at the Wings Over the Rockies Museum in Denver, Colorado, with aerospace engineer Joe Wilding, exclusively here on the Aviation Show.